Hello. We should be live. We'll give you guys a couple moments to jump on here. Looks like Bob is already in our chat room, which is awesome. Bob, is always a pleasure to have you, my friend. But been a crazy week. I went to always a pleasure. Got multiple computers talking to me here. But anyway, yeah. So crazy week. We've been really busy with Griffin Air stuff. I've had a hard time finding help, but that's not necessarily the biggest problem in the world because we just have been a little pickier about the work we can take on. And so I was talking to a guy today, and we were saying, well, it's a good problem to have, because I'd rather have that problem than the other way around and the phone not be ringing. So what's up, Ryan? Good to see you. Bruce, good to see you. I went to a comedy show this week. I don't know if any of you guys know who Jeff Leeson is, but he pops up on my Facebook sometimes, and he was in Richmond, so it was kind of fun to go watch him. He interacts with the crowd a lot more than the average comedian, so it was a pretty fun time. So Steve is back. What's up, Steve? Good to see you. So yeah, I last week we started the live show talking about I don't know how many of you guys have been keeping up with this out in Colorado, this heat and air system that fell on 6 people, sent 6 people to the hospital, and 2 of them with life-threatening injuries. And I've been I've been Googling it all week and have not been able to find any more information on it. So I don't know if any of you guys know anything about that. Steve, maybe, but one of you guys that you're in the trade, maybe you know more than I do. I'd love to get an update on that, because I was reading on one news source that said that one of the people with the life-threatening injuries actually passed away, but I can't find that on any of the other websites. So I don't know how reputable that is, because sometimes information like that, it's not accurate, So again, I'm talking about the heat and air system that fell out in Colorado. I don't know if any of you guys have gotten any. I've been searching, trying to get more information on that, see if everybody's okay, and I'd love to get an update on that. But Gary says, hey, Josh, you're a subscriber with Mitsubishi System, talking about microphones and such. I like that truck thing you did about parking. Yeah, that was kind of a goof. I've got this little, I don't know if you guys know what a Mitsubishi Santa Cruz is, but it's kind of reminds me of the old Monte Carlos. It's kind of like a car, but it's got a truck bed. And so I got one of those. It's taken some getting used to, because I used to have a big Dodge 2500 diesel truck. So this was quite the change for me. But I made that short this week, and that was kind of funny. Just kind of, sometimes it's better to pick on yourself, rather than have others, say these things, right? So anyway, but yeah, so if you're on here and you have any heating and air questions, looks like we've got a few other pros on here tonight as well. Feel free to drop a question in the chat, and we will try to get that answered for you. In the meantime, I have a question for you guys. As you guys know that hop on every week, I've been trying to get this a little more interactive, where I ask you guys questions. And my question this week is there anything in particular that we are not making videos on that you think we should be? Anything in particular that, we could do a video on? And more specifically, it's hard for me to do real specific videos, like real detailed videos. And what I mean by that is, I'll get people and they'll say, hey, can you compare the Lennox? And they'll give me a model number, and they'll say, can you do a video comparing this to the Goodman? And they'll give me a different model number. And And, it's hard to do videos on stuff like that because, first of all, I'm not a Linux dealer. So I don't even know how hard it would be to get my hands on that equipment. And, I don't know. So I'm just kind of looking for some ideas, maybe some general ideas on videos, maybe something that you've been looking for that, we could maybe put in the mix. So that's my question to you guys tonight, starting our show off. If you have anything you think that I should be doing videos on, please drop that in the comment section, and we'll look at doing that. Ryan says, share your thoughts on the 22.5 SEER 2 inverter from Daikin Amana Goodman model DX9 VC. How does it compare to the smaller fit? Both systems are communicating, but have different SEER 2 ratings. So, I think the DX9, that's still the unitary, right? That it's not side discharge. DX9 VC. Yeah, that's still the unitary. So we don't do a lot of straight AC stuff here in Virginia, at least my customer base. We do a lot more heat pumps. So it would be equivalent to the DZ9. And essentially it's still the DZ20s, which is we at Griffin Air have installed several of the DZ20s. But as far as comparing, you're going to have a larger coil. That's really the biggest difference. There's going to be other things that it might have the ability to do being a conventional system, but not much. The Fit basically has the same technology that the DZ20s or the DZ9, or in this case DX9. It has the same communicating inverter technology. Just the biggest difference is it's just a smaller coil. So you're not going to see these tremendously high SEER ratings because you can't. The coil is just simply not large enough to reach those. But it still has the same technology. And that's a lot of times when I'm telling people to compare things, I tell them to not look so much at the particular ratings, but in the technology itself. So if I'm comparing, say, a single stage system, a two-stage system, like a two-stage compressor, and then I've got an inverter. I think there's 3 different categories there: single stage, multi-stage, and then inverter systems. And then you could break that down in even further when you get to inverter systems, and you can have, say, communicating inverter systems and non-communicating inverter systems, and the advantages of that. It doesn't matter. There's systems out there that are 3-stage compressor. Some brands are making these 3-stage compressor systems with a higher SEER rating than the Fit. But in the reality, when it comes to real world applications and the advantages, and of not just the Fit, but any communicating inverter system, it's going to perform better all day long. As far as the overall performance, I guess you would say. There's so many more advantages. You don't have the temperature swings. You don't have the stages and things like that. You get that same technology that you would with a regular communicating inverter system. So it's kind of a long-winded response to a simple question, but which costs more for the customer? Is there a scenario where you would recommend the DX9 over the Fit? Yeah, I mean, when I quote our systems, we offer both. We'll offer sort of that, lower end single stage 16 SEER. Then we'll offer the Fit, and then we'll offer, and I think I even write something on there like for people that want the best, like the best, SEER rating, the best of everything, you're going to go with that highest end system that Daikin sells. So other than that, again, the Fit's still going to have that same communicating inverter technology. Mr. Romo, I don't want to try to say your first name, but he said doing a video on the most energy efficient HVAC. I'm going to make some notes here on some of the responses you guys have given us. Most energy. I think I did a video where we talked about, I think the video is called the 5 best HVAC systems on the market today. And I think one of the systems we highlight in that video is, I think Lennox has a system that has the highest SEER rating system in the residential market. And I could be wrong. Of course, we're not talking about geothermal and all that good stuff. We're just talking about split systems. And I'm wanting to say that they, as I looked across each of the main, manufacturers' websites, that they had a system that was, that had that higher, I think I'm wanting to say it was up to 25 SEER, maybe 26. Sean says inverter comparison, more on the communicating versus non. Lots happening here. Sharing real life examples would be interesting. I agree. I think I could do a better job of sharing, real world examples of some of this stuff, because a lot of it's theory, right? Theoretically, one system's going to be more efficient than another, right? Emery says, I have a question. How much can a save on a variable speed AC system compared to a single stage system? Emery, there's really a lot of variables on answering that question. It's not like, when you buy a car and it gets 5 more miles to the gallon and you say, well, if I drive 100 miles in each car, I'm going to save this much. There's so many variables when it comes to heating and air systems. And that's part of the reason they are vague with some of these ratings. They can't specifically say you're going to save X amount of dollars per year, because, the first thing is they don't know how much you're going to use that system. Weather also plays a role in all of this. How well you take care of the system, how well the system was installed, is the ductwork sized properly? Things like that all affect how much you're actually going to save. So it's hard to give you a definitive number on that. There are websites that get you close. You can, when you're looking at SEER ratings and things like that, they can try to, attach, you're going to save this much. In fact, I think Daikin has a calculator on one of their websites that we've talked about before, where you can punch in, here's how big my house is, here's, all these different questions, you answer them, and then it'll say, okay, well, if you go with this system, you should save about this much per year. Everything says Carrier makes a 5-stage, just get the very true, sir. Rich says, last week said I had an AC inspection and they said we needed to replace the system, leaking coil, short cycle, etc. Second opinion said you have a great system, no issues, keep it another 10 years. Wow. Third vendor is the same opinion as second. That's concerning. Sounds like maybe they were trying to sell you something there, maybe. Everything says always get a second opinion. That's very true. Especially if you're talking about a major repair. Most good heating and air companies are going to be fine with you getting a second opinion. They're going to say, oh, you want to get a second opinion? No problem. Just let us know if you decide to go ahead with the repair. Because they should be confident in what they're quoting you. It's these companies that have these closing sales tactics. We've got a company here locally that they're famous for that. If you're confident in what you're telling the customer, you should have no problem with them getting other opinions. Sean says the Carrier 5-stage system is an inverter. I have the Bryant version and it's an inverter. Well, it's kind of counterintuitive to call it a stage system if it's an inverter, but I don't know. Everything says don't call the first guy back. That's true. Bob says, Emery, if you make those changes, you may save from 20 to 40% in energy, but your investment will be higher as well. Very true. Ryan says, for video ideas, working with a homeowner to see their electric bills before and after installing an inverter heat pump system, did they see any savings versus their older heat pump or gas furnace? I've looked at doing stuff like that, but again, it's just so many variables. So like, for example, if I install a system and, what if that next month the temperatures rise and it's, in other words, it's hard to equate this is exactly how much you saved. I don't know. I'll have to look into that. Let me think on that a little bit. Maybe we can figure out something. Gil says, I have a link around the fill valve. I have a leak. Okay. Around the fill valve on my unit. What can be done to fix that? I'm not sure what you're calling a fill valve. That's a term we use for toilets. Maybe you're talking about the service ports. And if it's leaking, if you're talking about refrigerant, then it would have to be repaired by a professional. Everything says you're right, Sean. I like the full variable speed better. Mr. Romo says energy coat efficient water heater. Ryan says Carrier has a 42 SEER mini split. Romo says I have a 14-year-old house, might need a new system soon. So I'm assuming you're saying that the system that's there was installed with the new house. So yeah, you're right in that range. Usually 15 to 20 years, you're usually on borrowed time. But it just depends. There's so many variables. If you take good care of the system, I've seen systems last 20 years. Rheem and A.O. Smith make a heat pump water heater. Other manufacturers do also. Those are the most popular for homeowners. Yeah, they're a little pricey, but the advantages are on those things are quite astonishing, actually. Those heat pump water heaters, and that's where you can really, if you want to talk about seeing a significant savings that you can see almost immediately on your electric bill, those can do it as well. Akira Dog says, I have a Daikin Aurora 36K multi-system with a 12 and 24K. I turned on the dehumidifier function and it brought the temp down to 65 degrees in the house when it was 82 degrees out. Is this normal? It definitely sounds like it was, blowing some cool air there, and they really shouldn't change the temperature that dramatically. So if you are seeing it, if you're putting it in dehumidify mode where it's got the little water drop and you're seeing a significant, temperature swing, you might want to have a pro take a look at that. Brian says, do you have a dehumidifier on your personal Bosch system, or were you able to fix any humidity issues via the settings like fan speeds or dip switches? Ryan, I did a video on this. I think it was the second Bosch video I ever did. Here in Virginia, we paid very close attention to the fan speeds to get that humidity, keep that humidity in check. And the other thing is we always turn dip switch number 4. Now I'm talking about the 1.0. I have not installed many of the 2.0s. So, but the 1.0, we always turn dip switch number 4 on to get that colder coil, and that seems to help. But to answer your question, yes, I do have a dehumidifier in my home. I have one down in the crawl space. We have a sealed off crawl space, so we do that, to drop that humidity level. I live near the water too, so that doesn't help. Tech Junkie, welcome, pal. I cut my electric by 1/3 to 2/3 but changing out. I assume that by changing out my 3-ton 22-year-old heat pump to a Daikin fit. Yeah, I'm going to probably do a fit for my upstairs system soon. I'm just, keeping it alive as long as I can. And then as soon as it does finally die, we're probably going to put a fit up here. Ryan says, do you plan to have more collaborations on your channel like what you did with Jacob from the UK? I'd love to. I've asked multiple folks if they want to do collaborations, and you'd be surprised at how many folks that, either don't or I have talked to, there's a couple guys that are very interested, but we're trying to figure out if our content matches and what exactly we could do. One specific guy, he does mostly commercial work. So, and I do mostly residential stuff for homeowners. So just trying to figure that out. Sometimes you got to figure out what makes the most sense for, your audience and things like that. But Ryan, to answer your question, I would love to. I would do nothing but collaborations if I had enough folks that wanted to. I've even, and this goes out to any of you guys on here, I have reached out to companies that either they sell a brand that I don't sell or whatever, and said, hey, you can plug your company for free, no problem. Let's do a show, or let's do some sort of video together. And it's crickets. I have not had a lot of people bite on that. So if any of you pros out there, if you want to do a video, please reach out to me. We'll figure something out. I like doing collaborations. People see things differently than I do. I don't know everything. So I've got a guy that works for me that's forgotten more than I'll ever learn. So Tech Junkie says a heat pump water heater can cut your cost by 70% per month. Yeah, it's crazy. I had an employee that started telling me about these heat pump water heaters, and I had just replaced the water heater in my own home. And well, when I say just, it had been a year or two, but it's hard for me to jerk a heat pump. I mean, it's hard for me to jerk that water heater out that's still under warranty, but I don't know. You might be right. Maybe the savings are well enough that maybe I should just go ahead and bite the bullet and do it anyway. But very good point. Sean says, does the VRV Life connect to a water heater? I have the Ream and it's nice, but wouldn't mind heating the water while cooling the house. I am not aware if that, I don't think it does. Now, I could be totally wrong on that. And that's not that unheard of, right? But I have not heard. And now when you say connect to the water heater, I'm assuming you mean that it would have a hydronic coil that would come from the water heater, and that's how you would get your heating. And I'm not aware of anything that the VRV Life would do that would be like that. The VRV Life provides heating down to such a low heating temperature that you may not even need it in most climates. Not all, but most. Ryan says, for the video idea question, I had my power company allows us to see the power usage the previous year so people can make and compare month over month and year over year. Might just be my area, though. A lot of these power companies are getting more and more involved. There's parts of the country where some of the power companies are selling heating and air systems. Some of them are giving them away in some cases. Or in some way, I don't really understand how it all works because nobody in my area does that, but I've heard of that. And the other thing a lot of power companies are doing is they're connecting to these smart thermostats and controlling them on peak energy times. And I would dare say that they're probably also monitoring your usage. So what I mean by that is, they probably use that for data and so on. Years ago, when I first started Griffin Air, we had our local power company was installing these boxes on the outdoor units, and it would have two wires that went to it, to the outdoor unit, and they could control it from that box. But as time went on, instead of doing the boxes, now they do this thing where they'll give you a little discount on your power bill if you let them connect to your thermostat. So pretty interesting. Emery says Carrier and Lennox have the highest SEER rated products. Danny says, any recommendations for AC systems for condos? Well, it would just depend on what kind of setup you have, Danny, and where you're at. There's a lot to that question. But I think just off the bat, I would just recommend maybe looking at some sort of inverter system if you're looking to save money. We have some condos that we take care of, and one particular one, they had furnaces on each floor, and we're swapping them over to, especially the upstairs, we're putting in these pancake air handlers with no backup heat. So no furnace, no electric, they don't need it. So heat rises anyway. They have the furnace on the first floor, and I've not had a complaint yet. We started doing that a couple years ago. Tech Junkie says, I spend $700 a year for hot water. A heat pump water heater for me would be $85. I don't know what that means. You're buying the water heater for $85? If so, that's pretty cool. Ryan says Zach does a HVAC YouTube creator interviews. He just did Tad from Taddy Digest on Saturday. Maybe he might be interested. Good luck in future collabs. Thanks, pal. Yeah, I've talked to Zach a few times. He probably didn't even know who I was. Back then, I think I might have had like 1,000 subscribers on my channel. But maybe he'll see this and reach out. I don't know. I think that plays a role in this too. Like, I think I've noticed that a lot of guys, they will only work with you if they feel like they're getting something out of it, right? They won't work with somebody with a small subscriber count. I've never cared. In fact, one of the videos I did with a guy, he didn't even have a channel. He just was okay with doing an interview. He sold a different brand than I did. If you guys have seen that Ream video that I did, that was probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago. And so I'm not saying Zach did that. I'm just saying he probably didn't know who I was, when I reached out the first time. So they had done like a round table. It was like 6 of them. They would do these late night riffs and talking about things. And I kind of hinted at I would be willing to join, and I was not invited. Carl says, do heat pump water heaters have a good recovery rate? That's a good question. That's actually a really good question. I would dare say that the recovery rate is probably, now some of you guys know more about these than I do, but I would guess that they probably don't have as high of a recovery rate as these other water heaters, especially gas water heaters for sure. But even the regular elements, electric element ones, I would guess that they're not as high. Tech Junkie says, yes, they are as high, but they can also use electric in a hybrid function. Interesting. Leo says, hello, do you guys service Aldi, Virginia? I guess he's talking about Griffin Air. And if so, I've never heard of that place, so probably not. Tech Junkie says, any unit should work that's sized correctly. Sean says, my 80-gallon heat pump Ream water. I like how we're talking about the water heaters a lot tonight, guys. Just a different topic, right, than we normally talk about. Sean says, my 80-gallon heat pump Ream water heater does well, but I have it on a schedule to go into high demand during shower times. That's a good point. Especially these units that have the ability to to do the scheduling, just like you would a thermostat on a heat and air system. I'm surprised we don't see more of that with things like water heaters and other products like that, where they only work, when they need to, peak time sort of deal. Real life cost is about 3 times the sticker though, since I don't leave it on heat pump only. Tech Junkie says, do you need that much water? Sean says, yes, I do. I have 4 kids and an ADU for my mom and her husband. Big house, lots of people. And then Tech Junkie says, no, from $700 to $85 a year on electrical costs for water heating. Gotcha. So yeah, we're caught up on our chat here. If you do happen to see us on Facebook instead of YouTube, just realize your message may not pop up on our screen here, beside my chubby face. So right there, you may not see your message, but I will see your message. So if you're on Facebook and not YouTube, I will still see your message. Anyway, so if you have a heat and air question, please drop it in there. Some good ideas on some videos. Appreciate that. I do have some videos coming up that, one of them, let's see, I don't have them in front of me, so I'm trying to go off of memory. We do have a video. That's right. That video just came out. The DaikinFit.com video. If you guys haven't seen that, check that out. It goes through not just the fit, but the website and what they're showing you. And there's some offers on there. I think that's really important to note that and I'm not saying Daikin, I'm saying companies in general, the more transparent they are, the better. And I really like, you guys already know I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, the Daikin Kool-Aid. But I like how they're transparent about that stuff. So, like, in other words, there are some manufacturers that will tell the contractors or their dealers, hey, we're having this warranty, or I mean, I'm sorry, this rebate or this some sort of incentive. And it's very much between the manufacturer and the contractor. It's very possible that the contractor's customers never even hear about it, right? That if the contractor doesn't advertise it or even tell the consumer about some of these rebates and incentives, that they may never even hear about it. Maybe that contractor puts it in their pocket, or maybe they just don't think that that it's worth it. And so I think there's something to be said for, when the manufacturer is very transparent about it, even to the end consumer, where they say, hey, here's our incentives, get your best price from the contractor, and then you can get these incentives. Just something to note there. Ryan says about Zach's channel, it's a shame as you have very different perspectives than many people he interviews, and it would be refreshing to see you on there. You would show Daikin a lot of love. That's true. I've said before, and again, this isn't a knock on Zach, but just in general, I've noticed so far, maybe this will change. I hope it does, but I'm not really in the fraternity of a lot of the guys that do this stuff yet. And I don't know if I ever will be, because a lot of guys don't like what I'm doing. They don't like the information that I'm giving to homeowners. What's odd is some of them will accuse me of being a DIY channel, which I am not. If you've never seen me do a video and say, hey, Ms. Homeowner, let me show you how to do this or that on your air conditioner, my goal has always been, hey, Mrs. Homeowner, let me show you what to avoid. Some of the tricks that contractors are doing. Let me show you something you can do to try to avoid some of this stuff, right? But what's weird is some of the guys that would say, we don't like what you're doing, you're giving away too much information to the homeowner, but then they'll do a video or watch a video of a guy doing a video of showing how to do something. Now the guy will say, this isn't for homeowners, but we all know homeowners are watching those videos, right? So the guys, to me, those guys that are, and I don't care. I've never said to them, you shouldn't do that. I don't care. But if you are doing a video where you are fixing an air conditioner, for example, and you're showing what you're doing, to me, that's just the same as doing a DIY channel, because homeowners are going to watch that stuff. So I'm not saying it's bad that they watch that stuff, but it's just odd that they don't like what I'm doing. But, if their favorite heat and air guy that's doing videos on heating and air stuff, they are okay with that, if that makes sense. So it's just odd to me on that. So I'm just not in the fraternity yet. Maybe I will be someday, but right now I'm just not. Some of these guys, I've actually gotten some pretty nasty emails, not from any of these guys specifically, but just other pros in general, not liking that I gave the thermostat code out. Carl says, on an inverter system, when they ramp down to a minimum, are they drawing maybe 25% of FLA or what? Great question. So every brand is different. Most of them are, well, I shouldn't say most, because I don't know if that's actually true. Most of the ones that I've laid hands on communicating inverter systems are usually going to be around 30%. So, but 30% for some of these, I mean, the decibel levels are just so stinking low. I mean, you almost kind of get right up there at the unit and be like, is this thing even on? You put your hand over the fan. Is this thing on? Sean says, I like to see how things work. Would be interesting to see you take some of these inverters apart. Oh, wow. And show what's the same and what's different. That's interesting. Yeah, I'm going to write that down. I don't know if that's something I'm going to do anytime soon, but that's taking things apart. Yeah, especially I think just like the one thing that comes to mind is when you have these side discharge units, maybe showing a lot of homeowners don't even know what's under the hood, what exactly they're purchasing or what they're seeing. They just see that it's something different. They see a fan blowing out the front instead of the top. But maybe, at least doing a video where we kind of show what's under the hood, show why it's different, show the size difference. Some of these components are significantly smaller on a side discharge unit, even for a high capacity unit. Just the components themselves are smaller. So that's a good idea, Sean. Ryan says, with new refrigerants, how much more efficient are you hearing from manufacturers that new systems with the new refrigerants will be, or what will be different? Have you heard anything? So ultimately, I don't think there's going to be a big difference at all, Ryan. I think that from what I'm hearing, the working pressures of these newer refrigerants are going to be very similar to 410A, which is much higher than R22 ever was. And I don't think that you're going to see that big of a difference. The real thing here is the real caveat, and what they're pushing here is that they're better for the environment. It's not that they're going to save you any energy. But one thing that it should be maybe noted is the carbon footprint on these are lower. And what I mean by that is when the system can perform better with less refrigerant, then the systems can be designed that way. So, and what I mean by that is if you take say a 3-ton R410A system and a 3-ton R32 system, the R32 system generally is going to need to hold less refrigerant in that system to get the same amount of performance. So that there's a little bit that you'll save there. But I don't know that you're going to see like, oh, you went with a new refrigerant system, so you saved all this energy, right? The other thing to maybe note on that is, 410A, as it gets phased down, it'll probably go up in price, whereas the hope and dream is with these new refrigerants, they'll be around a while, and they're, if you do get low refrigerant or you need to make a repair and you got to pay for the refrigerant, it's going to be less costly. So that's another thing with all of this. Another advantage, I guess you could say. Bob says, that's the way I feel about the other channel. Too much chit chat. Yeah. I get that a lot, that I'm too chit chat. So that's fine. I've noticed everybody kind of has their own way of doing things, and, you may not like my video. It's part of the reason you'll see guys do videos on the same exact topics. I've actually seen one guy copy my stuff, which is fine because he's got folks that are going to watch his stuff more than mine. I'm not going to say what was copied, but you could tell that he copied my video, made his own version of it, and that's okay. The pie is so big that everybody can have a slice. Uncle Fester says, our electric company offers an interruptible AC service at a lower rate and a 3-tier rate. It's $1 per kilowatt on high demand days, 4 to 8 p.m. Uncle Fester, I am curious. Hopefully you're still on here. Please let me know, what do you think about that? Because we have a few customers with that same, I don't want to say problem, but we had a customer that the electric company was not allowing the thermostat to bring the backup heat on, and it became a problem a couple times. And so they eventually actually got away from it. So I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are. Are you okay with that? Do you just, you just assume that it's a high peak day and you're going to do something different, with your time, maybe get out of the house while it's saving energy that day, maybe. Gary, Indiana says, did you attend the Daikin training? Go to Daikin University webinars, trying to get trained up to offer Daikin with confidence and installation and repair. So great question. So we have been to several trainings, and especially when the Fit came out, but when we first started selling Daikin, and just like any other brand or product, I think this is normal. We, laid our hands on it a couple times. We sold one, and I had sold. It's a long story, but I had sold Goodman for a few years, and I know Goodman gets a lot of hate, but I was putting them in, and I wasn't hearing back from customers. So those of you that don't know, Daikin owns Goodman, and so they do now anyway. That wasn't true when I first got into this trade. But I was just putting them in and never hearing back from the customers in a good way. And I couldn't say that about some of the other brands that we were installing. So that kind of stuck out to me. And we had a price increase on a brand, and the perks weren't like trainings and things like that. It just wasn't as good. So that's part of how we got started with them. Once we had installed a few, the rest was history, because we were like, this is good stuff. This is a good product line, and we're installing them. They're high quality, etc., etc. Jack says, I have found contractors that upsize quotes and sell the rebates. Some are honest. It was good. I needed a major replacement when not busy. Interesting. That's good to know. Home Rapid Repair. Welcome, pal. He's a good friend of mine. Carl says that 30% may represent 75% of operating conditions. Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying there. The 30% capacity running. Yeah. Gary says, I find all those quote mufflers unquote in the copper lines interesting. Yeah, me too. I think you're going to see more of that sort of stuff coming out too, where they're going to really, not just affect the refrigerant flow, but just in general the systems. You're going to see technologies and components installed in some of these systems over the next decade that were never heard of before. I've already heard noise in the industry that they're going to start installing refrigerant leak detection devices in these systems. So we'll see. Ryan says, video idea, a day in the life of an HVAC owner would be a nice video. Something different to show. Let homeowners know what it's like and why professionals like you charge for your expertise. That's a good idea. I have done vlog. That's what I would call that type of a video, like a vlog. I've done videos like that before, and to be honest with you, they've never really performed that well. Partly, probably, it's because people don't really care that much about about what I'm doing. But I'm sure we could probably do something interesting with that. In fact, the couple vlog videos that I've made that have done well are videos where I actually, like, I did that video where I attended the AHR Expo. I did another video. Well, see, I haven't, anyway, I did a job fair recently and I made a video on that, or I recorded, but I have not made the video. So it remains to be seen. I haven't gotten all the footage yet for the B-roll stuff on that one. But anyway, I'm probably telling y'all more than you care to know with that stuff. But yeah, we do have something cool coming up, and I'm not going to get into it tonight, but I've got a trip that we're going to be taking soon to something. and I probably will do some vlogging with that, which will be fun. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, stay tuned. I've got a trip we're going to be taking soon. I'm going to bring the camera, and we're going to be capturing some behind the scenes stuff on some things that a lot of homeowners are not privy to seeing. So stay tuned for that. Maybe that's my own little way of dangling something out there, but yeah, I just don't want to say anything more than that right now until I get all the details. Jack says, is Daikin a Goodman? Goodman doesn't have a great reputation. So Daikin owns Goodman, and some of the products do cross-match, and some of the products don't. So in other words, Goodman doesn't have the fit. But when the 14 SEER was out, and I think in the northern states they're out, some of the model numbers do cross-reference. And you're right, Goodman doesn't have the best reputation in the world, and I think that's not because of the products themselves. We did a video on this where we talked about it's the fact that people, that don't know what they're doing can get their hands on a Goodman. And so because of that, it's easy to get a bad reputation, of failing when people that don't know how to install them correctly are installing them. And that's my 2 cents, because when we install them, genuinely, we don't hear back, in a good way, more times than not. And there are some other big name brands out there. I'm not going to mention them, but other big name brands that I cannot say that about. Florida Flash says, we have a second home in Fort Myers. Good for you. I'm very jealous. We have 2 systems, one up 3-ton and one down, which is a 2-ton, 5-stage condensers. What should we set the temperature, not being there the entire summer? Also, what should the humidity be? Man, that is a great question. I can't answer that for Florida. I can tell you in Virginia what that answer would be. And that is, we tell because I live in an area where a lot of folks have second homes as well. And we tell them to not let that temperature get above 76 degrees. We do have one, I can think of one customer that'll set it up even as high as 78, but it always seems like if they get up to in the 80s, you do start to maybe, have things in the house that, I don't want to say they fail, but that you are going to have maybe some humidity issues and things like the system's just not running and removing that humidity enough. And then to answer your question on what should the humidity levels be, I would definitely like them to be under 60%. We've done videos on that. And in fact, there are people that have done way better videos than mine on what those humidity levels should be at for, if nothing else, mold growth and air quality issues. You want to keep that humidity below 60%. Some guys will say 50, but definitely below 60. Jack says, my power company wants a variable rate. I'm still flat rate since my highest usage is at peak residential demand. Interesting. Uncle Fester says the interrupter can only turn off the AC for 20 minutes an hour on demand days. Oh, okay. So only 20 minutes. That's not the case here in Virginia, or with some of the customers that I've talked to. In Michigan, we don't get real hot too often, so the savings is worth it. We now use the 3-tier and save 30% a year. Wow, that's really good. Emery says, so if they are installing leak detection systems, would that eliminate the need for gauges? And if so, how would that work? It would not eliminate it. It would tell the homeowner there's an issue. So especially if it's a communicating system, it would pop up on the thermostat that there's a problem. At least that's how I envision it. I don't really know. I haven't laid hands on it yet, but that's these refrigerant leak detection systems. That's what I think is going to happen. Jack says, it's been unusually hot here. Love variable speed compressor. We do not realize hot until step outside. Always hated the old on and off system. Very, very true, pal. Sean says, put together a reel of hackery you see. I'm sure people would get a kick out of it. That's a good point. I'm glad you brought up the reels, or the shorts is what YouTube calls them. I'm going to be doing some shorts on some scams and stuff like that. That's in the hopper to be coming up soon. So I don't know if you guys like the shorts. I just have fun with them. That's why I do the goofy ones, and they're not meant to. Not all of them are meant to be necessarily informative, but I just have fun with them, I guess. Gary says, company I work for sells 75% Goodman. Callbacks are rare and usually minor installer error. There you go. Gary said it. That's the same for us, man. Genuinely, the problems if we get callbacks on them usually, and when I say callback, usually if I get a call from someone that has a new system on Goodman's, it's usually because somebody installed it that didn't know what they were doing. And I mean somebody other than us, obviously. Not that we're perfect. We have had issues here or there or whatever, but I can vouch for what you say there. Emery says in Texas, it's very humid here. You must be close to the eastern part of Texas, because I've heard guys from the western side of Texas say it's very not humid there. Ryan says, do you find that attics with radiant barriers, cool attic, much in your experience? What temperature delta do you see between the house and the attic with a radiant barrier? We don't see it a lot here yet. I'm seeing it more and more, though. We just did a job probably about 2 weeks ago that had one. And yeah, I do think they're worth it, especially if installed correctly. Same question with spray foam. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to answer the Delta T question, because I don't want to tell you incorrect on that. But if everything's installed properly and you're keeping things in mind like ventilation and humidity levels and things like that, especially with the spray foam stuff, then I think they're a good thing. But I can't speak for all parts of the country. There's a video out that I saw where another heat and air guy was talking about the dew point and attics that start to have humidity issues when they do get spray foam and they do these conditioned spaces for areas that were never meant to be conditioned. But the energy savings, especially when the unit is actually located in the attic. So if your heat and air system's located in the attic and you turn it into a conditioned space, the energy savings is significant at times. If you have an attic that your unit is located in the attic and it's not conditioned, and when I say conditioned, I mean like the spray foamed on the rafters, and you actually heating and cooling that space, keeping it somewhat reasonable. It might not be as cool as your house, but somewhat reasonable. I would say if you don't have that type of an attic, I would at least keep an eye on how hot it gets up there. And they make these solar fans now. I have had customers pay the $500 or $1,000 to have an electrician or a roofer install these solar attic fans. This isn't even something that we sell, right? But I've been involved where they did that. And the idea is it's solar, so it only runs when the sun's out. It doesn't have a battery or anything. It just turns on if it's hot in the attic and the sun's out. It can draw power, and it pulls that heat out of that attic space. And of course, at night, when you might be sleeping and you don't want that noise, of an attic fan running, it's not going to run. There's no sun, is kind of the idea. So, but I have had customers tell us, wow, I've seen a humongous savings, just in the past month, after we put in that attic fan, because they're getting that heat pulled out of that attic where their heat and air system is located. It's literally sitting in an oven. You've got a heat and air system that's supposed to cool your home, and it's sitting in an attic that's 140 degrees. It's going to have some performance issues, Sean says, does zoned return air exist? In the Pacific Northwest, we have a 2-story homes with one system. Need more return in the summer through upstairs. Could see some benefit to zoning return in addition to supply. Thoughts? That's interesting. We don't deal with that in Virginia. I can tell you that. I've never seen returns that were zoned. But I see what you're saying, though, especially in areas that, if it's not enough return air through that area, we'll sometimes add returns, so it's pulling some of that air out. But that's an interesting question. I would wonder, and again, every house is different, but I would wonder if on days that you are seeing an issue where it says need more return in the summer through the upstairs, I would wonder if you were to turn the fan to the upstairs only to either circulate or on in the in that one zone only, if that makes a difference for you. Because what the idea would be, the other zones would reach temperature and turn off, and then that one would too, right? So it would turn off, but the fan would continue to either circulate or pull air from those other zones, because the returns would not be zoned, right? And so when you have these returns and supplies and spaces, I always use like the analogy of a loop. You're creating loops throughout the house. So you'll have a return on this end of the house and the supplies in that area, and you've got all these loops. And then you go on the other end of the house and you've got a return there and more loops. And so if you don't have a loop there, then you could have issues. That's why sometimes to solve an issue, it's not to add more supply. We'll see guys run another duct over there. Let's push some more air into that space. When in reality, if they add another return or size the return correctly, all of a sudden they feel a little draft through there. Ooh, it's starting to feel cool in this space. Bob says it's dinner time. Have a good night, Bob. Sean says forcing the variable speed fan to be on medium helps, but seems like that defeats the purpose of variable speed. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly going to use more energy, but that's sometimes you have to, maybe use a little more energy for more comfort, if that makes sense, or vice versa. Have a little less comfort to save some energy. Carl says, I have a FAU in the unconditioned attic. I assume that maybe that means fan. When the AC comes on, you can feel the hot air from the ducts at startup. Yeah, that I've seen that too. Yep. Emery says, how do you take crawl spaces into account when sizing ductworks? Sometimes you don't. It depends on if it's a conditioned crawl. I think that's what you're asking. If you're sizing the ductwork based on the crawl space, then if it's going to be a conditioned crawl, you do have to keep that in mind. Now, if you're not talking about a conditioned crawl, then I don't know that it would take any account on it. Matthew says, is Goodman a reliable brand to have installed? If it's installed well, Matthew, you might be just joining us. We just talked about Goodman earlier in the show, and we were talking about how if it's installed correctly, I don't normally get callbacks on them. We put them in, and I don't hear back in a good way. Gary says, too funny. Just sat down to my dinner while watching the Josh show. 9:27 p.m. That's a late dinner, pal. You must have had a busy day, or is that normal? Gary, by the way, I think you're the one. Were you the one that told me that I was using this microphone incorrectly? Ever since you told me that, I started using it this way, the correct way, and I've seen a noticeable difference on several of the things that I use it for, so including our live shows here. Sean says, do you feel like dehumidifiers to have separate return or tied into the main trunk? So it depends on what you're using the dehumidifier for. I will say that the majority of dehumidifiers here, where we're located, we will locate them in the crawl space and not tie them in the ductwork at all, and just have them do their thing. And they will dehumidify and lower the humidity levels in the house. Matthew says, I did just join in. Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, the problem with Goodman, Matthew, is anybody can buy one, right? And so because anybody can buy one, a lot of times it'll get a bad name because someone that doesn't install it properly is having issues. And so the homeowner or the customer thinks, well, it's the problems with the product. No, it's not the product. It's the installer, Gary says, yes, you were right. Awesome. I'm probably going to mispronounce this, but Chucho says, how many installs do you have a crew do in a typical day? Just one. I don't kill my guys. I did have a crew at one time that they could do 2 in a day, especially at an apartment complex where everything was at the same place, but we just do 1 a day. And if the guys get off in the early afternoon, which they do sometimes, then, we honestly, if we budgeted 8 hours for that job and they didn't spend 8 hours on it, we'll usually pay our guys 8 hours anyway. So that's how we do it. And we are hiring. So that sounds good to any of you guys. We have had a tough filling one of our spots. Tough time. I just did I had an interview scheduled on Monday. Have a good night, Sean. Well, today's Tuesday, so maybe it was Friday. It was just recently. I had a bunch of interviews scheduled, but I think it was Monday, so that would have been yesterday. It just seems so long ago now. But I had a bunch of interviews scheduled. 4 people. One of them, in his defense, called in the day before, and said, "Hey, something came up. I'm not going to make it." One guy, I'm wanting to say, called that morning, or we called him because we always call folks and say, "Hey, just want to make sure you're still good for our interviews today." He said, "Hey, I'm not going to make it." Oh, that's what it was. He wasn't going to make it, but he was in Norfolk and he wanted to do a phone interview. And then the other, which, I'm like, we scheduled an appointment and you're not going to be here for the appointment. So no offense, but I'm not going to do a phone interview now. But anyway, and then the other 2 out of the 4 were supposed to be here and they just simply didn't show up. So we have had a tough time filling this one spot. So we will fill it. I'm going to keep turning rocks over, but we're going to find somebody good that wants to be a part of what we're doing. But it's been crazy. Let's see. Matthew says, "Do you think hard start kits are a good thing to have installed?" It depends on the application. But yes, we have installed hard starts, especially if we get a compressor that, it needs one. Chacho says, "That sounds great. I normally do 2 a day. Actually had a full install today that started at 11 a.m. Yeah, my guys, I would rather them take 2 days on one install and it be right. And, I've got one guy, he's like an Energizer bunny. He could do 2 a day, I'm sure. But I don't want them to. I want them to take their time, get it right, do everything you're supposed to do, make sure everything is sized right, make sure everything is just installed right. And I'm not saying you don't do that. I'm sure you do, but that's just kind of, I've seen guys just to rush, and they will, not, do something wrong. They'll cut a corner or they'll miss something, trying to get the job done quickly. Charles says, "I'm interested about the job." Charles, go on our website, griffinair.net, and apply. So yeah. Let's see. It's about 9:30. We're going to wrap up here soon. So if you do have a heat and air question, please put it in there. We've had a really busy chat tonight. Normally I'll get to sprinkle in some other things, and we did get to ask one question to you guys, but I didn't get to sprinkle a whole lot in tonight, other segments, if you will. So it's been a pretty busy chat. Julian says, "I've heard that high MERV filters overwork the air handler as it has to work harder to pull air. What are your thoughts on this? I'm in Florida." So Julian, there are some systems and high MERV that will raise the static pressures high enough to where it does overwork the air handler, but some don't. And, a lot of the media filters that we will install, the static drop or the static added is very insignificant. It should not play a role. If everything else is sized properly and it adds, 0.1 static to it, the system is still going to operate just fine, and it does not abuse the system that much, especially if the filters are being replaced as often as they should. But there are filters out there that they are starving the system for air, and it, causes other issues such as abuse to the fan motor itself. It's overworking it. Other things like not pulling enough air across the coil, And on systems that are non-inverter, you could have frozen coils and things like that, and so on. So you just want to keep the static in mind. I don't know if you're a pro or not. It sounds like maybe you're not. I don't know. But if whether you are or are not, have the static pressures checked before and after that, that filter's installed, and you'll know if it's causing an issue. Emery says, how do I avoid contractor scams? Great question. I think part of it is you're going to want to make sure you're getting multiple opinions on certain things. Part of it is once you find a good contractor, hanging on to them, treating them well. I have customers that will call us and specifically ask for one of our technicians. They'll say, hey, I really liked him. I felt like he was honest and so on. I want him again and so on. Let's see. Another thing is if you are in the market and you don't have that contractor yet, maybe keeping a close eye on reviews that are bad for the company. And what I mean by that is if you've got a company that, let's say you're comparing two different companies on Google, and one's got a let's say he's got a 4.9 overall rating on Google, and then another one has, say, a 4.4, right? And so you might automatically say, well, the 4.9 company is better, right? And I would say in general, they probably are, right? There's a reason why that other company has a lower rating. But take the time to read those reviews, especially the bad ones, and see what they're complaining about. If they're like, well, I thought their price was unreasonable. They showed up when they said they would, and they called ahead and they provided a really good service, but then I thought their price was a little steep, so I'm leaving them a 1-star review. Well, are they really a 1-star company at that point, or could you just not afford good service? Or could you, maybe that is the going rate right now, and the customer just hasn't had a lot of companies, or maybe their prices are really high and they deserve maybe a 3-star review. Hey, they did some good things, but their prices were a little much. I thought they were maybe taking advantage a little bit. So anyway, the point is just I would take the time to read those reviews. And then the last thing is on things to avoid contractor scams is I would get everything in writing. I've had customers say that, hey, can I see your license? Can you show me proof of your company's license and insurance? Can we get what you're saying in writing? You're going to do this for this amount of money. I'd like to get that in writing. What exactly are you going to provide me? How much money are you going to charge? And so on. Chacho says, hopefully, Chacho, let me know if I'm saying your name right. Chacho. Thoughts on piece pay and pay per hour? That's a great point. I think that if you've got a good guy that is doing a good job, I don't know that I think they both have their pros and cons, but I do think that whether you pay them one way or the other, as long as you're paying them a fair rate, they're if I find a good guy, I want to hang on to that good guy. I want him to be happy as much as I want to be happy, right? I want to be happy with him and his work, but I want him to be happy coming back to work every day. And a happy employee is going to tell homeowners and customers that they're happy and why and so on. So I pay all my guys hourly for reasons that, I'm not going to get into, I guess, on here. But we don't do a lot of new construction either. So if you do a lot of new construction and it's makes more sense for you to do the, piece pay. I think that's what you're talking about, where you're basically being paid per install. Then that's different too. We do a lot more service, system replacements. We do a little bit of installs, ductwork and things like that. We just finished a job where they had nothing and we installed all new ductwork and everything. But we still pay by the hour. And then if I need to take care of my guys, if we did pretty good on a job, I like to take care of them, incentivize them to continue to do a good job. And again, take care of a good employee. Stanley says, everything is costing too much. I'm finding most people really don't read anything. Stanley, elaborate a little bit. I need a little more context on that. I do agree that inflation has been quite high on a lot of stuff. I'm finding people really don't read anything. Carl says, educate yourself as much as possible. Get second opinions. That's true too. Educate yourself. That'll help you avoid some of the scams. I did a video where we did 3 different clips of news or organizations that were, I don't want to call them undercover stings, but basically where they were reporting on scams that contractors were doing. And then I watched those videos and kind of did a reaction to them. And it is interesting, some of the things that you see these guys doing or getting away with. And so, yeah, get a second opinion, especially if it's going to be a large repair. You want to make sure you're being taken care of, I guess. Stanley says, hourly, easy, done. I'm sorry, Stanley. I don't really understand what you're saying, buddy. Everything is costing too much. I'm finding most people really don't read anything. Hourly, easy, done. Maybe you're talking about the installers and that they don't read the instructions, and I can agree with that. It drives me nuts when I don't care how long you've been doing this. You don't know everything. Read the instructions, please. I tell my guys, read the. Especially if I get a younger guy that he's still learning and stuff, take those instructions home, take the manual home the night before, read over them. That's what I used to do. Read that thing from front to back. What if it was people don't read your contract? What if it was, even though you've been doing this for 20 years, but they just came out and said all compressors, when systems are installed, if it's going to be 240 volts, which most residential systems are, that you need to move one wire. And you would never know that if you didn't read the instructions. It just drives me nuts when I see these guys not read the instructions. To me, that's one thing that'll set a good technician apart from a bad one. Because, even the best technicians don't think they know everything, right? It's the guys that think they know everything that usually don't know much at all. No less than they think they do. Let's put it that way. Well, good enough. It's 9:43 here where I'm located. I appreciate you guys watching. We're going to be back next week, Tuesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Find out what that time is in your local area, and please join us. We had a really good turnout tonight. We were over 30 people at one point, and again, the chat was rolling to where we didn't really get to do any of our side segments that I like to do sometimes, and that's not a bad thing. I'd like to grow this thing up to 50 people or more, to where we're able to answer questions, go over things, and really cover some good stuff. So yeah, thank you, Chucho. Let's wrap up before you guys leave, and let's close with this. If you are in an area and you have a good heating and air company, or of one, please share where they're located and what their company name is. So what area are they located in? Maybe a city or an area that they service. Let's give them a shout out. Maybe someone on here will see where they're located. Maybe they're located in that same area, and they can start using that company as well. So let's shout out a few good companies before we wrap up. Gary says, always a great time, Josh. See you next week. And your shorts during the week. Have a good night. Thanks, Gary. Appreciate the kind words. Again, any of you guys, if you know a good company, let's shout them out, where they're located, and so we can, help the good ones, the good companies, get some exposure here. So nobody has dropped one yet, so maybe you guys don't know any good companies. I'll give you a couple minutes here, and I'll go ahead and plug one good company There's a company called Griffin Air. If you're in the northern neck or middle peninsula in Virginia, they're pretty good, and they offer the best warranties in this area. So good enough. I guess if nobody's going to name drop anybody, no problem. We'll see y'all next week, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, live again. Invite a friend. Let's get up to 50 people on here and talk about some heat and air stuff. That'll be great. Thank you guys. Have a great night. Make it a great week.